there, film fans. We are back with another edition, can you believe it, of Unfinished Business. We're making it. Oh, and look who's here. Mr. Andre Joseph, what are you still doing here?
Hey, I'm glad to hear. I got nothing else to do. I'm on a break from my film.
Well, while we have you here, why don't you plug some of your upcoming projects?
All right, well, my next upcoming film is called Dishonorable Vendetta, which has been in production for a few years, but now we officially have worldwide distribution, so we'll have some announcements on that soon.
Congrats.
On my website. Thank you, Mr. Gallashaw. And I also just completed a short film entitled Night Stream, which we shot last month, and that's right now in post-production as we speak, so hopefully we'll have that in the festival circuit by the end of the year.
Yeah, there's somebody in that film Night Stream, actually. Isn't there somebody who might have done a voiceover too in that film? Who could that be?
Oh yeah, the guy who's standing right next to me here.
Yes, with my golden melodious voice. Very good. And that will seg into our topic of the week, which is something quite interesting that I don't think gets enough attention necessarily. Educators in films. Now, I'm not talking coaches, because we see that all in sports films. That is why you will not hear about Coach Carter this week. But I'm talking about teachers who make a difference some kind of way. Dead Poet Society, directed by Peter Weir and starring Robin Williams. Have you seen this film?
I haven't seen it in years, but I do remember it very well.
This film, to me, is quite interesting because this was one of the first times I've ever seen Robin Williams be dramatic. And, I mean, the film has a lot of up-and-comers, Ethan Hawke, Robert Sean Leonard, and it's actually directed by Peter Weir, who I had more known for making, kind of these epic-sized stories. And here he's, kind of making a smaller story, which was originally supposed to star Liam Neeson, actually. But there was something about it that kept me interested.
I mean, it was definitely one of Robin Williams' great dramatic roles. Even though he had done some drama previously, I think this was one where he had like a very Oscar-worthy performance. And Robert Sean Leonard, I remember, was really amazing to watch. Was he the guy that he kind of went crazy and then put the Christ thing over his head?
Yes, that was Robert Sean Leonard.
That definitely left a vivid image in my mind after I saw that movie.
Such a dramatic scene from such a dramatic actor. And Ethan Hawke even started the whole Captain, my Captain ending scene.
Yes.
It's good for what it is. The next film, Up the Down Staircase with Sandy Dennis. It was made in 1969. Have you ever seen this film?
Never even heard of this film.
Okay, this is Sandy Dennis playing a woman, well, she was female, who goes to teach in an inner city school. I remember it being interesting, but since we've seen this by the time I had seen it before, it's kind of like, I guess, a 1960s Dangerous Minds with not as much violence. The Principal, starring James Belushi. I love this film, even though I can see how some people might consider this film racist, but it is just tons of entertainment. And while he's not an educator per chance, he's a principal. I mean, come on, this film with Louis Gossett Jr. supporting.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing the trailers when I was younger, when it was out in theaters, and thinking to myself, not that I really knew much about James Belushi, but I'm like, this guy from SNL, John Belushi's brother, playing a tough high school principal in East LA. I mean, yeah, it's absurd, but I think that's why it's such a fun movie to watch, because it doesn't take itself seriously. I mean, my favorite scene, and this is probably embarrassing to say, it might even date me, the montage which Stripes set it off as they're cleaning up the school.
Yes.
I love that scene.
I have to download that song because I totally forgot about the scene. But I have to say, this has two of my favorite scenes that are kind of campy. One where he gets his ass kicked and he makes all the Hispanic teenagers who work in the garage fix his motorcycle, and when they bring it back, it has El Principal written on it.
I want the way it was.
And then he's like, oh, but this is okay. The Substitute with William Forsythe, who is one of my favorite B-list actors in the film, and he's only in a cameo. But to give some background, after his girlfriend is attacked, what is he, Special Forces?
Yeah, he's a Special Forces Marine officer, I believe.
He decides to go undercover at the school to find out who's behind the attack of his wife. Now, this is also noteworthy because one of the main villains is played by Mark Anthony, pre-Jennifer Lopez. And he's in full Skeletor glory here. And so, I take it you've seen this film.
Yes, I have, and this reads to me like a poor man's Steven Seagal flick. If you'd thrown Steven Seagal in there instead of Tom Berenger, it probably would have been more fun to watch.
Hey, I like Tom Berenger. He's good in his stiffness as this ex-special forces. I mean, I especially enjoyed the scene where he actually has to audition to kind of be a mercenary for a drug lord, or an accountant of a drug lord, played by Mr. Clifton Young. Detachment, starring Adrian Brody. Now, this is a little departure from the films we've been talking about, because while this film has violence, it's more of a drama. And I was actually shocked that I enjoyed it as much. It's directed by Tony Kaye of American History X. And while it has artistic flourishes, I think what makes the film work is this isn't a film about teachers trying to solve the problems and everything. It just shows you what the teachers have to face, more or less, and how each of them kind of tries to get through their day or their life with educating. I mean, Adrian Brody's obviously the star, but we get to see a glimpse into all the actors' lives and what a cast it has. You know, you have Christina Hendricks from Mad Men. You have the great James Caan. You have Lucy Liu.
William Peterson.
You even have a cameo from Bryan Cranston, Mary Kay Place, Isaiah Whitlock from The Wire. And like I said, I think this was a film that was great. It should have gotten more notice than it did. What did you think of the film?
I enjoyed Adrian Brody's performance in it. You know, I thought he didn't play a cliched kind of, I'm going to make a difference to my students. It was just more like a hard-edged, you know, I know what you're feeling, but sit the fuck down and, you know, get through the class. The only thing I didn't like about the film, which I felt was the most cliched, was the relationship between Brody and the runaway girl that ends up living with him and ends up having feelings for him. And then on top of that, you have Kay's daughter in the movie playing like the troubled, obese girl who also has feelings for Adrian Brody and ends up trying to do some things to herself that we won't spoil again here.
Freedom Writers with Hilary Swank. Don't ask me why I enjoyed this film. I know white woman tries to make a difference in the inner city. Again, we're visiting Sandy Dennis territory. But maybe it's because as a writer, I found it interesting, her trying to get them to have an original voices. By the way, there will not be Precious on this list, just so since we're talking about educators and make a difference. But, you know, I'll admit, this is very cliche-ridden and it's based on a true story, but I actually enjoyed it for what it was worth. Did you see the film?
I did not see Freedom Writers.
The next film comes from the 80s, actually 1984, and stars, of all people who you would not want as your teacher, Nick Nolte. And it goes by the name of Teachers, and it stars Judd Hirsch along with Nick Nolte and Ralph Macchio, which is probably the reason I watched this film in the first place when I was a kid.
Thank you for reminding me of Teachers, because I was trying to think about this yesterday. You know, a lot of these films that we've been discussing, I feel never quite captured the experience for me as a high school student. I think Teachers was the closest that it got for me, because you basically have Nick Nolte playing not the greatest teacher in the world. He's an alcoholic, you know, like basically the real Nick Nolte. But he's the kind of guy that's like, you know, let's not talk about the subject today. Let's talk about what's going on with you. And, you know, he inspires his students. Ralph Macchio, obviously, playing like the troubled kid who he kind of takes under his wing and shows him how to read and shows him how to be a better person.
Who's really into photography.
And, yeah, Crispin Glover, one of his earlier roles, playing, you know, his typical Crispin Glover part. But, you know, what happens with his character was like totally out of left field. And even Judd Hirsch, you know, playing the principal of the school, who you think is going to be like Nick Nolte's buddy because, you know, he was just off a taxi, but ends up becoming the bad guy of the movie, which I thought was very shocking.
Lean on Me, which came out in 1989, directed by John G. Avildsen, who has directed Rocky, Joe, and many numerous films. Let me ask you, Mr. Andre Joseph, why do you love this film so?
It's an absolute guilty pleasure, and Morgan Freeman really carries that role as Joe Clark, coming in all Dirty Harry-esque, changing up the school, making it better. But there is my pet peeves with the film.
Okay, I would like to hear these pet peeves.
Well, for one, in contrast to The Principal, which didn't take itself seriously, this movie takes itself seriously, but not in the best way. Because when you see East Side High for the first time, it is freaking like hell on earth. I mean, down to the drugs, the girl fights, and even the one part with the teacher getting his head bashed in the cafeteria.
Yes. And that's in the
which was
credit sequence.
Yeah, like the darkest thing you'd ever see in the whole movie. But then once Morgan Freeman comes in and throws all the bad kids out, it's like all of a sudden now it's all, nice and rosy, and the problems aren't as serious as they were in the beginning.
I have two pet peeves with this film. I find it interesting that his character, and when the film starts out, he's a hippie, and then all of a sudden his character is all like military rule when he takes over the school. And my other pet peeve, this is a small thing because it has to do with like the facts of what happened, is that in real life, obviously Joe Clark didn't get the scores up or anything. That's why after like his one term as the principal, he left the school. To Sir with Love. I love this film. This is in my, I don't care what you have to say out there, this is part of my top 10 movies of all time. But it was just Sidney Poitier standing, because I watched this as a young man, and obviously you don't usually see a lot of black movie stars at the time other than Eddie Murphy, Denzel Washington. But the thing that impressed me was that at the time, the 1960s, where it was kind of hard to be a black movie star, this film showed he had style, he had presence, he had a smoothness. But this film, you have him walking in and they're treating him like he's trash, and he actually teaches them how to be respectable members of society.
It set the standard for his career after that, to play these educated, strong black men who stand up to adversity.
But as you know, this ends this business for this week, but there's always unfinished business. So let me ask you, Andre Joseph, have you seen Scott Pilgrim vs. the World?
Yes, of course.
Thank God. And is it not awesome?
It is mother awesome.
And that's going to do it for this week.